Let's take a look at this one. This is entitled Go Ahead, Marry Your Cousin. I don't know what I could possibly say to preface this, so let's just dive in.
Welcome, everyone. This is Taboo 2. I've been sitting on this topic for a couple of years, worried about the repercussions of going public with the concept, but the idea keeps scratching at me, and since I'm not trying to win any popularity contests here, and my channel is called Taboo for a reason, I decided to go ahead and present the idea, which I hope leads to further discussion because I actually believe this is important. Let me begin by saying that this issue has nothing to do with me. I'm happily married to a person who is not my cousin, and we've been married for 19 years. I never knew my cousins for most of my life, and they're all like 20 years older than me, and so you can dispense with those knee-jerk personal attacks as this isn't some sort of hidden desire of mine.
No, I think I'm gonna do them anyway.
But I do believe that we've been tricked over the last 200 years into believing a falsehood that has allowed powerful families to maintain control over you as they care about their bloodlines. In contrast, you probably have no interest in your bloodline, and your lack of it.
This is unironically from It's Always Sunny, the McPoyle bloodline joke, but he really thinks it's real. Oh my god, he's falling for the pure bloodline meme.
Interest was designed that way. But many of you are probably laughing to yourself,
Yes, because this is stupid.
thinking of all of the inbred and deformed royals who somehow didn't get the memo that they weren't supposed to marry their cousins. But I asked
Yeah, we didn't know about genetics back in the day. It was thought untrue that it was thought, how do I put this? They believed falsely that they could strengthen and purify their bloodlines by intermarrying within families. They were wrong. As it turns out, genetically, inbreeding is a really bad idea.
you, what if that memo was instead written by those royal families, and they laugh at you for your unquestioning gullibility? Here's a hypothetical for you. Suppose marriage between cousins was encouraged in today's society, and there was no alleged health reason to not marry your cousin. With this hypothetical environment in mind, let's suppose you married your first or second cousin. Your parents were cousins, and their parents were cousins, and so forth. Ask yourself this question: what would your family be like now?
Inbred. They would be very inbred, and any genetic conditions that were already prevalent within your family's genetics would be exacerbated. It would be terrible. You would also be much more likely to be susceptible to, like, genetic defections and illnesses, and oh god.
Would you have a closer bond to your family?
No!
Would you have a closer bond to your spouse?
No! I don't want...
Would your children have a stronger bond with their family? Would you despise your in-laws, as many of us do? Or would you have an impenetrable familial bond?
There's like 11 more minutes left in this video. How much more could he have to say about wanting to bang his cousin?
Do you think it would have an impact on maintaining wealth in your family and long-term objectives? What about geographic proximity? Would you do the unthinkable and even group together in a community and create a lasting estate for the family? What about unique familial traditions? Would you still have them? What about your relationship with others outside your family? Would you be less interested in non-family relationships? And for those Game of Thrones fans, would you be more like the Lannister family, without the evil side, and even have your own family crest that you honored and cherished?
You can make a family crest without banging your family! No! Baha, who is a PhD candidate, not only someone I love deeply, my girlfriend, but also a PhD candidate in developmental genetics, this is right up her alley, says they would be having a hard time getting pregnant for sure, and all the bad recessive conditions would get super prevalent.
And could care less about other government-imposed identities.
Government-imposed identities? What does that mean?
Be vastly more important.
That counts for Baja Blasts on the bingo card, by the way.
Important to you than your national, state, or city identity. What if you then somehow convinced everyone else to dilute their bloodlines by marrying whomever?
Oh god, is this gonna be some racist miscegenation bullshit? Oh god, dilute your bloodline. What does that even mean? Fuck off.
But
genetic diversity is a good thing. That's a great thing, biologically speaking. You don't want to bottleneck yourself like that. It's terrible.
You kept your secret family institution going.
The idea of a pure bloodline means absolutely nothing outside of, like, sociology. Like, in a weird racist way, I guess, but that's a construction. In genetics, it's just bad. It's just bad. You're just bottlenecking your genetics.
Knowing the benefits. Would your family become more powerful while others become less so?
No! Whether or not you're inbred... It's like they think genetic disease is gonna give them superpowers. You're not gonna become Wolverine because your parents banged each other or because they banged their cousins.
Now, I hope the honest truth seeker is starting to see why I'm making this video. Now, this question may seem irrelevant, but how many people in society, when they think of colloidal silver ingestion, think of blue-skinned people like this? Do you think that it's a mere coincidence that many think of that blue man when they think of colloidal silver ingestion? Look at this article. I agree 100% with this article. The blue man theme was created by the pharmaceutical industry to scare you from using a very effective natural remedy that's an amazing cure for many ailments.
Or how about this? He took a bunch of colloidal silver and turned blue! Probably that one, huh?
Because of indoctrination in the media, the evil cabal was able to take a single or handful of cases out of millions of users to create a false illusion that everyone who ingests colloidal silver is going to turn blue. Hundreds of thousands of people die each year from pharmaceutical drugs, but no one thinks of that fact when they swallow pills from the pharmacy.
Yeah, I'm less concerned when something gets passed by FDA standards. Funny how that works.
It's fascinating how easy it is to manipulate humanity. As another example, let's say one child in America dies from polio who didn't receive the vaccination because his parents don't believe in vaccinations. You'd see repeated news stories scaring you about anti-vaxxers.
Yeah, because we've wiped out polio. It's all but been wiped out in the United States. And if an idiot anti-vaxxer gets polio, or more likely their child gets it because they made that decision for their child and made them vulnerable to a disease that has all been destroyed in this country, yeah, that's news. That would be news because it would be direct evidence of anti-vaxxers doing exactly what we said they were going to do, bringing back diseases and making us more susceptible to diseases than we need to be. What?
However, you'll not see a single news story covering the tens of thousands of children who die shortly after being vaccinated every year.
Oh my god, there's no indication that these children died because of the vaccine, unless they're people who specifically suffer from some sort of allergic reaction, which is incredibly rare. There has been no indication that vaccination leads to death for these children. My god.
Understand this.
I'm getting really hot. Sorry, I gotta take this off.
So, if some royal in 100 years has a hereditary deformity, that deformity or handful of deformities could be cited ad nauseum by the media to the point that everyone's convinced that all royals are deformed.
By the media? The bloodline inbreeding thing has been known long before the advent of modern media. What are you talking about?
Because they marry their cousins. and they allow that. I'm no expert here, and so we're left with Wikipedia for our research, but I did want to make a couple of points. First, look at how many royals have been continuing to marry their cousins. Look at the years at the beginning. 1999, 1993, 1989,
Yeah, and that's gross. And that's gross.
1984. And these are the ones we know about. Do you think these people are just stupid?
Let's see, most of these are from the 40s and 50s. There's some in the 20s, and there are a few in the 90s. One from, let's see, Monaco, and one from Bavaria. There's one from 89 in Liechtenstein. There's one from 84 in Belgium. The vast majority of these are back in the day, and notice that again, these are all from decades ago still, because everyone knows this is bad. If what you were saying was true, then every royal would currently be married to their cousin, but it's not that common relative to the number of people in royal families. It's just not common because we know it's not good.
And didn't get the memo that they're not supposed to marry their cousins?
Everyone on the list that you have right here, except for the top one, is from the 60s and before. This one's in 1919. This one's in 1921, 21, 22, 23, 26, 29, 30, 30, 34, 35, 39, 44. Do you see how as you get more recent in time, it gets less and less prevalent? It's because with the advent of modern technology, with the advent of medical science, and people learning that these things are not good for their families, genetically speaking, not good for their children, they stopped doing it. The most recent one on this list is from 40 years ago.
And these are the open ruling families. What about the hidden royal banking families? Like
the hidden royal banking families. That's gonna be a big ol' thinly veiled anti-Semitism on the bingo card.
The Rothschilds. That question brought me to this article from Discover magazine, which I'd like to read to you, in part. In Paris, in 1876, a 31-year-old banker named Albert took an 18-year-old named Bettina as his wife. Both were Rothschilds, and they were cousins. According to conventional notions about inbreeding, their marriage ought to have been a prescription for infertility and enfeeblement. In fact, Albert and Bettina went on to produce 7 children, and 6 of them lived to be adults.
Guys, the idea is not that one coupling between cousins, first cousins, and especially second cousins. The idea is not that one pairing is going to cause calamity immediately. The idea is that continually doing this generation over generation compounds issues. So once you get to like the 3rd or 4th generation of cousins marrying each other, this is when the real big issues come in. One person marrying their cousin is gross. Sure, sociologically speaking, I would argue that's not good. I don't think that's healthy to, like, get in a relationship with someone you're related to by blood, specifically because family dynamics are very different than interpersonal romantic relationship dynamics, and I think they should stay separate for a reason. But, like, beyond that, it's just not good praxis, right? Because if you continue to do that, and that compounds, it becomes an issue down the line. It's not about immediate results for you, although certainly you have a higher chance of having bad issues, right? You have a lower chance of fertility, and you have a higher chance of genetic illness, but these things compound over generations of this sort of thing, which is why royal families are often brought up in these discussions, specifically because they did this for generation after generation after generation. We see very prevalent examples of how that adversely affected their families as the years went on. It's bad because you are a link in a chain. And if you are a bad link in a chain, and there's another bad link in a chain, and there's another bad link in a chain, it gets worse and worse and worse as the chain goes on. It's destructive, and it's bad, and it's not fair to your kids if you're planning on having them.
Moreover, for generations, the Rothschild family had been inbreeding almost as intensively as European royalty, without apparent ill effect. Despite his own limited gene pool, Albert, for instance, was an outdoorsman and the 7th person ever to climb the Matterhorn. The American DuPonts practiced the same strategy of cousin marriage for a century. Charles Darwin, the grandchild of first cousins, married a first cousin, and so did Albert Einstein.
Yes, it used to be more prevalent back in the day because of our lack of understanding about genetics. There's a reason it stopped being prevalent.
That's fascinating. In our lore, cousin marriages are unnatural, the province of hillbillies and swamp rats, not Rothschilds and Darwins. In the United States, they are deemed such a threat to mental health that 31 states have outlawed first cousin marriages. This phobia is distinctly American, a heritage of early evolutionists with misguided notions about the upward march of human societies. Their fear was that cousin marriages would cause us to breed our way back to frontier savagery, or worse. You can't marry your first cousin, a character declares in the 1982 play Brighton Beach memoirs. You get babies with 9 heads. So when
That's hyperbolic, but it's indicative of real-world issues that will come from generation after generation of inbreeding, yes.
a team of scientists led by Robin L. Bennett, a genetic counselor at the University of Washington and the president of the National Society of Genetic Counselors, announced that cousin marriages are not significantly riskier than any other marriage and made the front page of the New York Times. The study, published in the Journal of Genetic Counseling last year, determined that children of first cousins face about a 2 to 3% higher risk of birth defects than the population at large.
Again, we're talking about individual couplings and not compounded issues caused by inbreeding within groups for generations. It's a compounding issue.
To put it another way, first cousin marriages entail roughly the same increased risk of abnormality that a woman undertakes when she gives birth at 41 rather than at 30. Banning cousin marriages makes as much sense, critics argue, as trying to ban childbearing by older women. Now again, Darwin and Einstein both married their cousins. What? They didn't get that memo? Think about it. The article I just read claimed that there's a 2 to 3% higher risk of birth defects with cousin marriage. Many of you are probably, whoa, I don't want to do that. But if you understand anything about statistics, a 2 to 3% is absolutely not a true correlation and should be ignored entirely because
Guy talking about statistics and blaming other people and saying they don't understand statistics points out 2 examples of people who were the products of cousin marriages that turned out okay, and saying that that's indicative of every person's experience. Genius.
It's meaningless. That's a fact. A 100% increase of birth defects would be worth investigating, but it is still an unlikely connection. A 200 to 300% increase tends to point to a truer connection. Despite all of the junk science stories you hear on a daily basis, a mere 2 to 3% is absolutely nothing statistically, and the true conclusion should be that there is no statistical increase. In other words, if cousin marriages resulted in a 3 times or 300% increase in birth defects, then there could be a concern for society, something to look into. But you cannot cite a minuscule 0.02 or 0.03 times increase because that is statistically meaningless. I hope you understand that. And if you don't, I suggest you read Junk Science Judo because false statistic manipulation is a horrible plague on society, especially in courtrooms. As a different example, look at the difference of lung cancer between smokers and non-smokers. For males, in this study, it's a jump from 0.2% non-smoker to 15.9% smoker. I think that's 80 times more likely if you smoke. Regardless of my math skills, you are many times more likely to get lung cancer if you smoke, not just a mere 1 to 2%. If there was only a cited 1 to 2% more chance of getting lung cancer from smoking, the correlation would be statistically nothing, and you'd be free to smoke without any fear of lung cancer because there is no correlation with a mere 1 to 2% increase. But getting back to our subject, there is absolutely no physical reason why you can't marry your cousin. And you can't cite that 1 to 2% increase in birth defects because that statistic is entirely meaningless for statistical purposes.
It's literally not, though. It's literally not. And again, you're not discussing the compounding issues in terms of, like, one generation after another participating in this same sort of thing. This is an issue as a population. This is a study talking about individuals when we're talking about the societal impact of this in large groups. Families interbreeding for generations in one area, causing genetic bottlenecks that exacerbates genetic illness within that bloodline.
Don't let statistics fool you into believing in false correlations and subsequent false causation. It really appears that the fear of cousin marriages began around 1846. As I read this article, ask yourself, was this a spontaneous study or an orchestrated movement to scare we, the plebeians?
It started happening most likely because, for one thing, genetic knowledge started coming around in the mid-1800s to the 1900s, and of course in there we had Charles Darwin doing his thing. But also, I would imagine at that time period, because European royal families had been interbreeding for so long, it was starting to become more prevalent. I would imagine those issues and genetic illnesses started to become quite noticeable, and people started asking, what's going on here? That would be why, because people started to see the consequences of their actions.
In 1846, Massachusetts Governor Briggs appointed a commission to study mentally handicapped people, termed idiots in the state. This study implicated cousin marriage as responsible for idiocy. Within the next 2 decades, numerous reports, for example, one from the Kentucky Deaf and Dumb Asylum, appeared with similar conclusions, that cousin marriage sometimes resulted in deafness, blindness, and idiocy. Perhaps most important was the report of physician Samuel Bemis for the American Medical Association, which concluded cousin inbreeding does lead to the physical and mental deprivation of the offspring, despite being contradicted by other studies like those of George Darwin, who was the child of Charles Darwin, and Alan Huth in England, and Robert...
I don't know why you bringing up that he was the kid of Charles Darwin is supposed to mean something. Science has nothing to do with who your dad is.
Newman in New York. The report's conclusions were widely accepted. I wonder why.
Because they were accurate, at least to an extent.
These developments led to 13 states and territories passing cousin marriage prohibitions by the 1880s. For the Christian, the Bible does not prohibit cousin marriage. Rebecca and Isaac were cousins. Rachel and Leah were cousins of Jacob.
And the Bible was written by Bronze Age people who did not know about genetics, okay? It's not your source for what you should and shouldn't do.
And there are others cited. But here's the main point articulated really well, actually, in this Wikipedia article. Cousin marriage has often been chosen to keep cultural values intact, preserve family wealth, maintain geographic proximity, keep tradition, strengthen family ties, and maintain family structure or a closer relationship between the wife and her in-laws. Fascinating.
That's not fascinating. I mean, it's sociologically, it's interesting that that's a thing that happened, but it's not indicative of what we should be doing. It's interesting in the descriptive sense as to how societies have functioned in the past and the sociological reasons that we did things. It is not interesting insofar as being prescriptive. You should not do this. We have learned why you should not do this. It's also pointless. We live in the 21st century, okay? Guys, current year argument. Preserving your culture means nothing. It means nothing. It means nothing. Cultures bleed into each other all the time. We live in the United States. We all have cultures that come from other people's cultures, and it all kind of mixed into one. It doesn't matter. The idea of having a pure bloodline is some white supremacist or whatever ethno-nationalist bullshit. Who cares?
There's a reason why the elite marry their cousins, and you don't.
They don't anymore. Not usually. At least not at a higher rate than the general population.
And it's not because you're smart and they're not. It's because they care about their bloodlines and estates.
It's because royal families are innately traditionalist and sometimes do weird stuff.
And they manufactured a false fear to cause you, the peasant, to abhor.
Lady Chelsea of the Void says, what modern-day writings do you think will be the basis for a religion in 1,000 years? How modern are we going? Scientology will probably still be around in 1,000 years, and that's based on a 20th century science fiction writer. But if you're talking about more recent, QAnon, probably QAnon people stuff, which is really sad, but probably.
Or the idea, and thus willfully dilute your bloodlines. The trickery has worked so far.
There's no such thing as diluting your bloodline. It's an imaginary concept.
But maybe it's time to change things. So I say, go ahead and marry your cousin.
Please don't.
Especially if they're hot.
Uh,
But now here's the hard part. You're going to have to convince him or her that it's perfectly fine. Good luck with that conversation, but just remember to point out the fact that Einstein thought it was smart too.
I don't.
Anyway,
Okay.
take care.
And is everything Einstein did automatically right? No. I've been told to check my Twitter DMs. One sec. Statistically significant changes in disease prevalence with inbreeding. This is from Baja. Let me turn the thing off and I'll pull this up on the screen, but I gotta get to my Twitter first and I don't want to show private information. So let me go open this up and then I'll put the screen back on. Again, this is from Baja, who is a PhD candidate in developmental genetics. Okay. So let's see. Here are the different diseases: coronary heart disease, stroke, cancer, schizophrenia, bipolar depression, or uni depression, which I assume just means regular old classic depression, like Coke Classic, asthma, type 2 diabetes, gout, peptic ulcers, and epilepsy, high inbreeding, moderate inbreeding, and low inbreeding. Statistical significance p-values in highly and moderately inbred groups is calculated against the low inbreeding group. P less than 0.05, P is less than 0.01, and P is less than 0.001. So as we can see here, we have compounding issues as we get from high inbreeding groups to low inbreeding groups. The low inbreeding groups, coronary heart disease has, what is this? Are these supposed to be like percentage higher? Baja? Close, very close. They're actually really damn close, aren't they? Is this percentage higher, Baja, in terms of like prevalence of these diseases? Because low inbreeding is 11.23, moderate is 11.95, close, and then 13.28. So we do have a jump of like 2 from low to high, but even between low and moderate, it's almost exactly the same. Stroke 1.73, 2.79, and then 2.43, which is interesting. They look like p-values. You're gonna have to explain what a p-value is. I don't know what a p-value is, guys. I'm not a scientist. Cancer 1.93 to 3.44 to 4.54. Schizophrenia 0.14 to 0.96 to 1.23. That's a huge leap from low to high inbreeding. Answer the phone. Oh, thank you. Hello. Hello?
Hello.
Oh, can you mute the stream so I can't hear myself in the background?
It's already muted. I don't know what the heck you're talking about.
Oh, I must have heard me from your phone. Sorry.
Okay. So, the only things that are statistically significant on this graph are the ones that have the asterisk.
Okay.
So, anything, what a p-value indicates is the percent chance that, the percentage of the time that these values could happen due to chance. So, for the ones with a single asterisk, it means that there is a 0.05% chance that these results are just random, that like they're not actually significant, but they seem to be significant. So there's less than 0.1% chance of them just being random.
Gotcha.
Right?
So like a 3 asterisk is like there's almost no chance this is just random.
Yes.
Okay.
So basically you can, and these are the moderate inbreeding is compared to the low inbreeding to get their p-values, and then the high inbreeding is compared to the low inbreeding to get the p-values.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see that with moderate inbreeding, there are multiple things that are statistically significant, but you get greater statistical significance when there's high inbreeding.
Sure.
So, like, of course, the coronary heart disease isn't increased, and they aren't claiming that it's increased.
Okay.
It's not statistically significant. But all of the rest of the things are, and this is, I believe that it's fold increase. So it's basically just a comparison to how prevalent is this in each group.
Okay. Do you know what their definitions were for like high, moderate, and low inbreeding in terms of like generational or anything?
I can definitely figure that out.
Okay, I'm just curious. Like at what concentrations of inbreeding, at how many generations are they determining low versus moderate versus high? Because you can definitely see, like at the low inbreeding, they don't have any marked as like statistically significant in terms of p-value, and then there's some in the moderate, but then once you get to high, it's like it's all of them that are statistically significant are the 3 asterisks.
Hannah, there's none marked in the low inbreeding because they're not comparing.
Oh, that's the baseline. That's the baseline. Sorry.
Yes, that's the baseline.
Okay.
Okay, so let me. I'm looking to figure out what they are calling low, moderate, and high.
Okie dokie. By the way, everyone, this is I love Baha, and I love her for many reasons. The fact that she knows so much about these things is one of these reasons. She's wonderful.
Oh.
The bipolar and unipolar or whatever depression it's like doubles. It's crazy.
Yeah.
The gout one triples. So does peptic ulcers and epilepsy. God damn. While you're looking for that, I'm going to go over the bingo sheet real quick. So let me know when you're good.
Okay.
Let's see. We have forced sterilization, population control as a motive. More population control on that one. We have... I'm going to say ancient wisdom because he's basically saying that, like, ooh, royal families of old knew this, and yet somehow, citing a study from the 18th or 19th century, that's not one we get often. What else? What else? I'm going to say that's not how science works. And I'm going to say someone forgets correlation isn't causation because they're comparing like, oh, royal families must be successful because of their inbreeding and not because of systematic issues involved in monarchy. Expert talks out of field because of Einstein. I'd say no, because Einstein wasn't making that claim or anything. The guy was just citing that. So Einstein didn't say that. That guy did. Oh, and of course Baja Blast's on the bingo card. I totally forgot that one. We're in the middle of the Baja Blast.
So high, moderate, and low refers to the inbreeding coefficient of these groups that were studied. So the inbreeding coefficient predicts the likelihood of partners.
There's nothing funny about the tools of capitalism.
So it says individual inbreeding coefficients were analyzed in a logistic
There's nothing funny
regression
about the tools of capitalism.
with disease status as the outcome. So basically the inbreeding coefficient just like is how likely it is that that they will breed with someone that's closely related to them.
Okay. So, like, if they live in an area where inbreeding is prevalent, like somewhere in backwoods Appalachia, and I'm not trying to stereotype, I'm just saying, for example, because there's a higher rate of incest there, that's considered, like, high inbreeding versus an area that's, you know, less bottlenecked genetically?
So it says that the individual inbreeding coefficients for each study participant was based on pedigree information from 4 or 5 ancestral generations.
Gotcha.
So it's calculated by how often, like, inbreeding occurred within their family over those generations. And these all are... these groups that were studied are from different villages in Croatia.
Okay. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there you go. I mean, I don't know how much, you know, clearer this could be. Don't do inbreeding, folks. It's not good for you genetically.
Yeah, it's kind of hard for people to understand the concept that it's not, you're not going to see, like, super significant changes from one, like, inbreeding event, but it happens across time. So if you married your cousin and had a kid, and then that kid ended up marrying their cousin, and then their kid ended up marrying their cousin, it'll, like, make the, recessive traits that you pass down that are normally balanced out by outbreeding, which is the opposite of inbreeding, they'll basically, like, compound the recessive genes in your family. Just because, like, think about it. If you and your cousin both have one recessive gene for, I don't know, heart disease, recessive just means it's not dominant. So you each have a dominant gene, which is fine, but the recessive gene is not fine. So then if you guys got married and had kids, your kids could get both of the recessive genes, and then they could have the disease.
Gotcha. Yeah, makes sense. I did Punnett squares. I understand this vaguely.
I love that you know what Punnett squares are.
Yeah. Well, that's all. I appreciate you calling in to explain all of this. I really do.
I love you.
I love you too, and chat loves you as well.
Thank you, chat.
Okay, I got a bit.
Sweetie, Hannah.
Oh, thank you. So are you. I gotta go.
You're my favorite.
You're my favorite.
All right, love you.
All right, love you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone thank Baja, of course, for that. Much appreciated. Very interesting stuff. That and I know we have a bingo winner. I'll get to that in a sec. Very interesting stuff, and it's not something I fully understood prior, but I'm glad that Baja was able to come on and explain that to all of us in a way that made it clear. Don't bang your cousins. It'll come back to haunt your family in the long term, if that's something you need to hear. So that's that video. Fun stuff.